Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out Green Lantern issue 13 by Jeremy Adams, Mark Guggenheim, Fernando Pasarin, and Matthew Clark. Hal Jordan finds himself imprisoned by Amanda Waller as the Absolute Power Summer event continues this issue. Hal was caught at the end of the last issue when he suddenly returned to Earth with Star Sapphire, as Carol Ferris has become a Lantern once more. Carol's return as a Lantern is something which Hal likes very much. So much so, this is one of the big things keeping him together, as Waller has him interrogated on the whereabouts of the other heroes and Lanterns. Hal doesn't crack and ends up using the interrogation to figure out that Tharos is the one that helps Waller with the blockade. But of course, Waller does plan on turning on the alien should the need arise for that. And she wants to know how Hal's power ring works, since she believes that it will help her with her takeover. I'm honestly surprised that Waller is trying to interrogate Hal Jordan, given that she is very well aware of his stubbornness and most likely his great will, so the man won't crack. So I'm intrigued to see why she's deciding to go this route, knowing that it's probably a futile effort. While Hal is tortured, Jessica Cruz returns to the Resistance on Oa, briefly ditching her cover as one of Tharos' loyal Lanterns to check in on her friends and warn them of the unseeing, making it so that Tharos stays one step ahead of them. As their plan to move base continues, we find what has become of Kyle, who has been feeling the effects of the spectrum disruptions for quite some time now, and because of it, he has become a multicolor Lantern, able to take on the colors of all of the spectrum. Kyle has always had an affinity for different Lantern energies. You know, he's been a green, he's been a white Lantern, he's been a blue Lantern, he's been various other Lanterns. And Adams has been building up a story in the background of something like this happening, or Kyle being related to what's going on with these spectrum disruptions. He's known about this for some time. Although I wish we had a little bit more, since that's really all we've been getting, just like little bits in the backgrounds of scenes where Kyle will talk about the disruptions kind of incoherently. You know, something's obviously been affecting him, but we don't really know what. And we did get a kind of a backup that sort of delved into this a little bit a couple of issues ago, but it didn't really do too much, and we needed just that little bit more throughout these stories, especially because this multicolor shift kind of comes out of nowhere, and there wasn't really any hint of it that he could do this. We know he obviously can tap into the multi-spectrum, which is why he's having these incoherent ramblings about it, because he's being disrupted himself, but to have it manifest in that he can now access all of the different colors is kind of out of nowhere. After getting through these main plot points, which has been sort of the running thing throughout Adam's book as of late, the book kind of shifts perspectives every couple of pages, picking up with various Lantern-related characters we've seen throughout the book, such as Sinestro, who is obviously a Red Lantern now, and after seeing what has become of New Karuga, he decides to get revenge on those who destroyed his world, and that kind of sends him off into the universe where he's over in Kneel Before Zod and that Sinister Sons book. Alan Scott and the JSA meanwhile probably get the most out of all of these different characters, as they are trapped on Earth thanks to Waller's plan, you know, the blockade and everything, and the Amazos are sent after the heroes. So he has to tangle with Jade Stone, the Green Lantern Amazo, who drains Alan and his daughter Jade of their Green Lantern energy. It's great that these tie-ins are actually showing us the Amazo fights that we glimpsed a little bit of in Absolute Power issue 1, expanding on them and giving teams like the JSA who aren't getting a tie-in book a chance to get in on the action. Alan, thanks to his connection to the Star Heart, is able to briefly regain control of it, long enough for him, Stargirl, and Owlman to teleport away, a plot which will actually continue with a bunch of other characters over in those Task Force 7 tie-in books. Adams briefly pauses his Absolute Power stuff to go back to Nathan Broom, Carol's now ex-fiancé, whom she abandoned in Las Vegas as they were about to tie the knot 2 issues ago. The man is overcome by immense sadness, and, you know, it's completely understandable. I like that Adams delves into why he feels this way, and he feels like he's done everything right in his life, or everything you're meant to do, you know, within the boundaries of the law and the rules of life, but there's always someone else who, you know, comes right into his life and, you know, is a rule breaker, or, you know, someone who's chosen over him even though he does everything right and is trying to be a good man. And that's kind of reached his snapping point here with Carol ditching him on their wedding day. And because of that, his engagement ring shifts into a lantern ring, making him the first Lantern of Sorrow. This really caught me off guard since I wasn't sure what Adams was going to do with Nathan and Carol, being that their story was kind of over with her getting her ring and returning into space and kind of leaving him at the altar. I didn't think we'd be getting too much more of him. I think he kind of served his purpose, and I really liked him as a character. I thought he was an interesting parallel to something like you see over in Amazing Spider-Man, the Paul character, where everyone immediately hated him because he just was dating MJ at the time when he was introduced, and that feels like what they were doing here, except Green Lantern fans are a bit more reasonable and let the story play out. And I quite enjoyed the character sort of sticking around in the background, appearing every now and then. And I like this idea that he's now going to be, I guess, a villain maybe to Hal. Maybe he's going to be battling Hal in some form thanks to the sorrow he feels. I'm really intrigued to see what Adams does with this post Absolute Power. Tharos is the next character to get a check-in, and of course he's all about power as he's collecting all the different Lantern Corps energies and planning on using it to help save the universe and, you know, correct it where the United Planets and the Owens couldn't. It's really a nothing 2 pages since it doesn't really tell us anything new, just more reiterating what the villain's motives have been the last couple of issues, which have been pretty clear for a while now. This really just felt that it was thrown in here just because, you know, you have to have a page detailing about the main villain of your book, so it's just kind of in here even though this is like a tie-in. Hal Meemaw escapes Waller's torture prison and finds himself in a giant facility where, while following some of the soldiers who are carting his ring off, he finds that Waller is having various weapons, devices, and artifacts loaded onto a giant ship that is probably bound for space. So in Absolute Power, we see that there is a hero resistance. Obviously Hal helps them out, but he doesn't have a ring anymore, and maybe this is the way that they get some of their technology. Hal literally steals it off the back of a truck, more or less, and I could definitely see him commandeering this ship and flying it off somewhere. You know, he is a pilot first and foremost, so I would like to see that sort of happen, and it kind of makes sense, you know, this is where they get the technology from. Hal manages to sneak out with it, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Hal's role in Absolute Power is now that he doesn't have a ring yet is still going to be on the Resistance Justice League. The book also features a backup by Mark Guggenheim and Matthew Clark, and it focuses on Tharos, exploring his rather turbulent childhood as the young Tharos was a victim of his father's abuse, which hardened the child into never trusting anyone. But the twist comes where that he is a Durlan who can shapeshift, and it's revealed that Tharos's father wasn't actually his father at all, but a local thug who had taken his father's shape after he killed him in a coup. Over the years, Tharos learns even more lessons from this thug, learning to be cunning and deceitful, turning him into the man who would eventually control the United Planets. This is the type of development we should have gotten a lot sooner. This is the type of backup that should have come a lot sooner, especially once Thanos became a more mainstay character early on in the run. Tharos eventually runs into the thug again years later when he's in charge of the United Planets, and while the guy was trying to run guns from the blockaded Earth out into the galaxy, he was caught by the Lanterns. I really love this little interaction as Guggenheim gives Tharos a chance to confront his father's killer and tormentor, having gained the upper hand for a change thanks to the skills this very same man drilled into him as a child. And he gives the man a chance to fight for his honor with the knife that killed his father or suffer at the hands of his torturers. And of course he chooses to fight and Tharos kills him. I get the feeling there's hints of a cycle happening here, whereas this happened to Tharos and Tharos is going to do the exact same to someone else, and it's going to be his undoing. There's definitely hints at that, and that's something that's very poetic with these type of larger than life characters, you know, these, you know, king characters who are in charge of things like, you know, the United Planets. There's always someone who wants to come and kill the king, and I imagine that's probably what's going to happen here. It's also a great story to show how formidable a character Tharos is. He's not a physical villain per se, he's more of, you know, a cerebral one who uses the Durlan's natural shifting powers to help manipulate and deceive people, and it's always about trust and distrust with him, and it works so damn well with a character like him because we've seen this sort of stuff happen from way back when he was in the Warworld saga as well, where he was using his power as leverage over people and manipulating them to do his bidding instead of actually, you know, fighting them head on. It's neat character work, but again, why is it happening so damn late in the story? This should have been a backup that happened not long after it was revealed that he's going to be the main villain of the book. It should have been in that book that he was revealed as the main villain. The Absolute Power event arrives in the Green Lantern books and for the most part is pretty great. It balances out Jeremy Adams' story plots and Wade's Absolute Power plot really well, even pushing some of Adams' own stories forward in some fantastic, very unexpected ways. Mark Guggenheim's backup, while a fantastic dive into Tharos' backstory and history, felt like it came a little bit too late, but nonetheless, it was still a compelling read. I am going to give this issue an 8 out of 10.